Some people talk loudly just to cover how little they know. That wasn't a line from a stage play. It was a sentence spoken by Karoline, a former Trump White House spokesperson, right in the middle of a nationally televised hearing, and the person she was targeting, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The cameras immediately panned to Jasmine. No rebuttal, no frown, no sign of discomfort. She simply closed her notebook and lifted her head. Her eyes showed neither surprise nor anger, just the quiet resolve of someone deeply familiar with the bias that hides behind polished insults. On social media, a clipped version of Karoline's comment spread like wildfire. Hashtags like #JustLoud and #TooEmotional began trending. Some mocked, "Is she a congresswoman or a political actress?" Others chimed in, "Speaking louder doesn't mean speaking right," and Jasmine, she said nothing. No table slam, no shout, just silence. Sitting still, amid narrowed eyes in a room that had started to drift away from her. She leaned slightly toward Karoline, not in confrontation but as if listening more closely than anyone expected. What no one, not even Karoline, anticipated was what happened next. A young woman, unnoticed until now, rose from the public gallery. A student, white, seated quietly at the back, and with a single sentence, she brought the entire room to a halt. Who was this student? Why did she stand? And what did she say that made those who had just been smirking at Karoline's words fall completely silent? You'll want to hear that. Part Hearing Room 5 in the House of Representatives was packed that day. The topic: the role of teachers in civic education and student mental health after the pandemic. On the surface, it didn't seem like political ground zero. But, for those familiar with Capitol Hill, it was obvious. The less attention a hearing gets, the easier it is to stage a political ambush. The session brought together education experts, school psychologists, and Representative Jasmine Crockett, who had spent nearly a decade teaching civics in a South Dallas public school. Jasmine wasn't there because of viral fame or flashy speeches. She was there because, in her classroom, the dropout rate for students struggling with depression dropped more than 40% every year. Not from medication, not from therapy, from one thing: learning their rights. No one needed to say it aloud. The researchers understood. When a child knows they have the right to say no, they find a reason to live one more day. Jasmine entered the room with her hair tied neatly, a folder under her arm, and a navy blue suit that set her apart in quiet contrast. No entourage, no press team. Just a woman who had once stood before teenagers and now stood before power. Across from her sat Karoline, the youngest panelist that day and already a rising figure in conservative media. Karoline was known for soft voices and sharp blows, her calm tone often hiding blades. Jasmine opened with a presentation using federal data and her own classroom results. Civic education isn't just theory, she said. It's a form of self-defense for children when the world won't hear their voices. No applause, no objections. Then Karoline spoke. Her tone stayed gentle. Eyes on Jasmine, voice controlled. I fully support improving student mental health. Teachers are vital in that. But I have a question. She paused, tilted her head, almost imperceptibly. Are we teaching students to be good citizens, or are we encouraging them to resist the system? The air stiffened. She continued, I'm not speaking about you directly, Representative Crockett. I'm speaking about a trend. Civic lessons today seem less about responsibility and more about resistance. Is this inspiration, or is it emotionalized life skills training disguised as education? A few Republicans nodded. Reporters typed. Faster, someone whispered into their mic. This is it. That's the soundbite. Still, Jasmine didn't speak. Not because she had no answer, but because she'd heard it all before. Parents had asked, why is my kid talking about privacy rights with teachers? A principal once warned her to mention the police less. She had been told her class was too focused on law, not enough on soft skills, but she had also found notes tucked secretly into her folder. You're the first adult who listened to me. I thought the Constitution was just for adults. You made me feel like I mattered. She looked directly at Karoline. No glare, no smirk, just stillness. One hand resting on her folder, the other holding a pen she never used, and it was. That silence in a room of people expecting her to snap, that raised the tension. Some thought she looked cornered. Some assumed she had no defense. And some started tweeting. 15 minutes after Karoline's comment, the first hashtags began. Hashtag too soft, hash just loud. An old clip resurfaced. Jasmine, 6 years younger, explaining to a class the right to remain silent. But the edit cut it down to a single line. If the law doesn't protect you, you have to speak up. No context, no students in frame, just a black woman speaking with conviction. The video spread fast. This is who's teaching your kids. Read one tweet. Teaching rebellion instead of resilience. The hearing carried on, but the energy had changed. Not because Karoline had won, but because Jasmine hadn't responded the way the room expected. She didn't flinch. She didn't clap back. She just remained. And that restraint. It made some even more eager to take her down. Karoline waited, then leaned in, careful, quiet. She's not educated. She's just loud, no raised voice. But the words sliced through the room like ice. And again, Jasmine didn't react. No one jumped to her defense. Not a single lawmaker. Not a single voice. The hearing continued, technically, but the silence around Jasmine had become its own statement. Not an outburst, a withdrawal. Then something happened. From the back row of public seating, a white teenage girl with blonde hair stood, about 17, school uniform, unassuming. A staffer started toward her to tell her to sit, but she raised one hand. Calm, her voice shook, but it carried. I'm sorry. But people need to hear this. Every camera turned, Karoline's head lifted. Jasmine finally looked up. The girl stepped toward the mic. No one knew her name. No one had invited her. But no one stopped her. My name is Ella, and if I don't speak today, I think I'll regret it for the rest of my life. The room froze. I was one of Ms. Jasmine's students. 9th grade civics. She looked only at Jasmine. My parents had just divorced. Everything felt broken. I didn't know where I belonged. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't even see a reason to go to school. She paused, eyes glassy but steady. I once wrote in my diary I could disappear and no one would notice. Then a breath. A faint smile. Ms. Jasmine's class was the first place I felt like I mattered. She didn't ask, "Where are your parents?" She asked, "Do you know what part of the Constitution protects you?" Silence. A CNN reporter removed his earpiece. An older congressman uncrossed his arms. Ella went on. She once said, "Understanding the law is how you protect yourself when no one else shows up." That changed everything. She didn't teach me to rebel. She taught me that pain isn't a reason to stop being human. No one interrupted. No objections. Not even from Karoline. Ella drew a final breath. There were days I only came to school because of civics class. Because Ms. Jasmine didn't grade with red ink, she graded with her eyes. She looked at me and saw me. The room didn't clap. It didn't need to. For the first time that day, no one was thinking about sound bites. They were remembering what truth actually sounds like. Today, I'm tired. She didn't make me write. She didn't call my name out loud. She just came over and said, "Whenever you're ready, I'm still here." Jasmine remained still, but for the first time, her gaze dropped. Not from weakness, but like someone who had carried a truth too long and was finally hearing it spoken by someone else. "If it weren't for Ms. Jasmine," Ella said, her voice cracking, "I might not be alive to stand here today." No one breathed. Not out of shock, but because no one quite knew how to breathe after hearing something that true. In that moment, the congressional hearing room wasn't a chamber of debate, it was a classroom. And the one teaching was a 17-year-old girl, speaking from experience, not theory. A young congressman bowed his head. An MIT education expert, ready? With a rebuttal, removed his glasses to wipe his eyes. A photojournalist raised his camera, but didn't press the shutter, as if any sound would disrespect the testimony just given. Jasmine still hadn't said a word, she just nodded, ever so slightly. And in that nod lived an entire silent world of those once dismissed as too loud. Karoline sat motionless. Her hand rested on her file, no longer flipping to the next page. Ella closed with one sentence, no tears, no raised voice, spoken like she was writing in her diary again. If I could find my worth in just one of Ms. Jasmine's classes, then please, stop asking what she teaches. She doesn't just teach the law, she helped me choose to keep living. That was it, no gavel, no button, just silence. The one thing no one in that hearing had been able to create except Ella. She stood there, as if the weight she'd carried for the past 3 years had finally been set down. She didn't look at Karoline. She didn't look at the cameras. She opened her small crossbody bag and pulled out an old sheet of paper, slightly wrinkled, folded in half, sealed with a yellowing strip of tape. I wrote this letter 2 years ago, she said, but I never dared send it. I thought maybe Ms. Jasmine had forgotten me. Maybe she had more important students. She paused, a soft breath. Then unfolded the letter. The ink had smudged a little, but the handwriting remained clear. She didn't read it aloud. She just spoke the words she had once written. You were the first person who made me believe I deserved to live. Not because I was smart, not because I was special, but because you made me feel like the law wasn't some distant thing for grown-ups. It was the umbrella that covered me when no one else would. No one in the chamber moved. Jasmine remained still, but her eyes glistened, not out of pride, but recognition. The things that matter most are often left unsaid until we fear it's too late. Ella placed the letter on the witness table. She turned to Jasmine. Her eyes held no fear now, only quiet, deep gratitude. And then, from the large screen at the back of the hearing room, a voice came through. Excuse me, would it be okay if I said something? The entire room turned. It was a Zoom call. A black teenager, maybe 18, wearing a white shirt and wireless earbuds. This wasn't part of the plan. But when the request popped up, wishes to speak about Representative Jasmine Crockett, the hearing coordinator couldn't bring themselves to hit decline. The chair gave a nod. My name is Malik. I was a student at Roosevelt High School in Dallas. In 10th grade, I got suspended for allegedly hitting another student in the hallway. But I didn't do it. The camera was broken. No one believed me. I was going to drop out, but Miss Jasmine contacted the school because I'd once been in her civics class. He paused, then continued. She didn't just ask if I was okay. She asked if I wanted to appeal. I didn't even know what appeal meant. She helped me write the letter, connected me with a community lawyer, cited the student code of conduct. In the end, the school reversed their decision. The room sank into a new kind of silence, not of emotion, but of reckoning. In that moment, the question wasn't whether Jasmine was right or wrong. It was, why does a civics teacher have to act like a lawyer just to protect her students? Malik looked into the camera. His voice didn't shake. It didn't falter. It stood firm. If it weren't for Miss Jasmine, I would have dropped out. Now, I'm a law student. I study law because someone once told me, you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know what you're saying. No one dared speak. Karoline lowered her head. Several lawmakers who had once sided with her now sat upright, hands clasped. At this point, the air in the room wasn't divided by politics. It was a space where reason was finally allowed to speak. A veteran reporter scribbled into their notebook, never seen a teacher defend like this, not for test scores but for gratitude. A photojournalist raised their camera again, but this time, they didn't capture Jasmine or Karoline. They photographed the wrinkled letter. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing isn't said into the mic, but written by a student who once thought they didn't matter. Then the chair asked, would anyone else like to speak? No one answered. But Ella looked directly at the lawmakers for the first time. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for every mic to catch. You all asked if Miss Jasmine was too loud. I want to ask, who's really too loud? The one who saved students' lives, or the ones trying to silence what they don't understand? No one replied. Because everyone was thinking, that was the moment the hearing stopped being a debate and became a mirror. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to stand. She didn't need to speak. What needed to be said had already been said by others. By the student who almost dropped out. By the one who was wrongly suspended. By those who had once felt invisible, until someone made them feel the law was for them too. And now, those who mocked her as just loud had to face the truth. They were never listening. The next morning, Twitter flooded with one hashtag. Hashtag, she saved me at first, just a few posts. No photos, no videos, just words. I almost dropped out because of my parents' divorce. My civics teacher told me, the Constitution hasn't abandoned you. I stayed. I was never asked if I was okay. Until my civics teacher pulled me aside and handed me a bottle of water. She said, resistance doesn't mean yelling. Sometimes it just means knowing you have the right to stand tall. Within hours, thousands of similar stories. Most from students, some from former students, some from teachers. Educators who'd been dismissed for teaching minor subjects posted photos, handwritten letters from students. A chalkboard message. Thank you for believing I mattered. A kid holding a pocket constitution like a trophy. It wasn't about pride. It was about proof. Civics teachers aren't just preparing kids for tests. They're saving lives quietly, every single day. CNN, the same outlet that once hosted Karoline, returned to Jasmine's old classroom in Dallas. This time, not to interrogate, but to document. Segment title, Civics Class, The Room That Saves. The reporter entered the weekend classroom, worn whiteboard, old chairs, no decorations, every seat full, no one performed. It was just another day, except now, the world was watching. The CNN anchor opened with a line. We used to ask, are civics teachers essential? Maybe the better question is, have we abandoned the ones keeping our students from the edge? A week later, a new bill was introduced on Capitol Hill, the Civic Shield Act. A Republican lawmaker, once a silent nodder behind Karoline, now its sponsor. I used to think civics was easy to teach, he told the press, but I forgot what's easily dismissed is often what holds together the most fragile souls. Ella was later invited to speak at the National Conference on School Mental Health. She didn't speak as a witness. She spoke as someone who had nearly disappeared. She ended her speech with one line. People ask what I learned in civics class. I learned how to survive without apologizing for still being here, and Jasmine. No statement, no interview, no press. She just kept teaching. Same room, same fans, same notebook. She wrote on the board, freedom of speech, limits and responsibility. Then she asked, when you speak the truth, and someone gets angry, what do you do? A young girl raised her hand. I don't need to speak louder. I just need to know I'm right. Jasmine smiled, gently. That was all. No banner, no victory sign, just the teacher, still teaching. But now the world knows what she's teaching, and who she's teaching it to. The hearing ended. No applause, no flashbulbs, just a silence, deep, long, real. Karoline left without a word, and Jasmine closed her notebook, stood, walked to the back door. A backstage staffer stood nearby. She looked at him, and simply asked, where's the way out? That was all. And when the footage went viral, no one laughed. No one attacked. They just paused, because everyone has had a moment like that. You don't fight, you don't perform, you just walk forward, through the silence that makes a whole room rethink itself. Ella remained in her seat, still holding the wrinkled letter. She took out a pen, and added one last line. The handwriting was shaky, but clear. I stood up, Ms. Then she folded it again, held it in her palm, like holding a version of herself that finally knew she was never alone. And you, if someone ever kept you from giving up when you were ready to let go, maybe today is your turn to say so.